I suppose we could introduce ourselves while we're waiting instead of doing it further in.
Okay,
Why don't we do that? Carol,
sure.
why don't you introduce yourself, Carol?
My name is Carol Potter, and I am a member of the Fibromyalgia Support Group of Winnipeg. Um, I don't come to you as a medical expert or any particular kind of expert on fibromyalgia, except that I have lived with it for 27 years and to whatever extent possible, have learned to manage my life with it. So that's where I'm coming from and to you today.
Thanks, Carol. I'm Fiona. I am a short-term counselor here at Heartwood Healing Centre, and I am the same as Carol, not necessarily an expert or anything like that on fibromyalgia, but do have lived experience with it, as well as lived experience with trauma and how things like that can manifest in the body. Um, and so you're encouraged today to take what is helpful for you and leave what is not. I see somebody has their hand raised. Maybe if you need something, you could type it in the text box for us so that I don't have to call anybody out by name because we try to keep anonymity something inside of the webinars. Um, so is there something that we need to attend to before we start today? Because I don't think that I can enable people's microphones. Oh, okay. Can't get onto the screen. So sorry, you're in the space, but you can't get onto the screen, so you can't see. You can hear me, but you can't see. Is anybody else having trouble viewing the screen as well? Um, because I might suggest that you log out and then log back in. So other people can see the screen. Um, so yeah, I might suggest that you log out and log back in, and then when it asks for permission to uh to allow your video or screen that you enable that and see if that helps. Oh, you tried logging in twice. Um, I wonder if you need to have a look at the video settings underneath the camera and see if you need to enable something there. Sounds like you've got some kind of barrier or wall up. Ah, you're on your iPhone. Um, it should work because this platform should let you do what you need to do, but iPhones can be a little bit tricky. Um, I'm not quite sure how to troubleshoot that in this moment, other than to try logging out and logging back in. Unless anybody else has a suggestion. Has anybody else had trouble with that kind of thing in Zoom before with your iPhone? Oh, you can listen. All right. The PowerPoint that you maybe can't see at the moment, though, will be available afterwards, and you'll be able to see what it is um, that you can't see. But we will be talking around all of the points that will be on the screen as well. So that's thanks for being so adaptable. That's what we like to see. All right, let's dig in. Thanks for being here today, everybody. It's kind of an odd day today, sunny, but a little bit cold and miserable. Um, so, all right. Uh, our land honoring. We always start all of our webinars and our presentations at Heartwood with a land honoring, and so I'm going to read um, instead of trying to do it from my memory. It is with gratitude, humility, and respect that we recognize and honor that Heartwood Healing Centre is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabewake, Dene, Nehiowik, Ochitishokoe um, territories, and the water that runs through our taps comes from Shore Lake. We are honored and privileged to do our work here, and we are committed to working towards reconciliation. decolonization, and anti-oppressive practices within our organization as we walk with individuals in their personal healing towards their recovery paths. So this is our agenda today. It's fairly straightforward. We'll go over some webinar agreements in just a moment. They're fairly straightforward as well. We've done our introductions already. We've kind of told you why Carol and I are talking to you today. And then we'll go over fibromyalgia symptoms, potential causes. I mean, Carol will speak to this. We don't love this. We don't really love this phrasing, do we? But then we'll discuss the connection to trauma, how people might find themselves diagnosed, and then what treatments might be helpful and strategies for living with fibromyalgia. So we've done the introductions already. But before we get there, let's do a grounding. We often do groundings at Heartwood because we find that it helps us get into the present moment and be aware of where we are in the moment and in our bodies. And when we have something like fibromyalgia or myofascial pain, it can be really, really helpful to just take a few moments and to engage in mindful practices. And so it's up to you whether you close your eyes or you don't. But we're just going to do a body scan kind of grounding just for a few moments. So no matter what's going on in your day, just take a few moments and begin by feeling the weight of your body in the chair, wherever you're seated, whether it's on a couch, a bed, a chair, in your office, and just notice where the points of contact are between the chair or the surface that you're sitting on and your body. And as you sit, just become aware in this moment of the sensations of your breath. You might feel that your breath is going in and out of your nostrils, or it might be passing through the back of your throat. You may feel your chest or your belly rising and falling. And just take a moment to be aware of that. When you're ready, move your awareness just down to the big toe of your left foot. Notice any sensations you might have in your big toe with a sense of curiosity and wonder. Are your toes warm or cold right now? What do they feel like? If you can't feel any sensation, that's okay. Just be aware of what's going on. As you breathe, imagine the breath going down your body and into your toes. Now be aware of your right foot and those toes on your right foot. And imagine breath going back up into your body and out of your nose. And you can use this kind of a strategy when you just want to bring awareness to your whole body that exists from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. And from here, you can expand your awareness to the sole of your foot. Focus on the ball and the heel of your foot, the weight of your heel, and the sides and the upper part of your foot, the ankle. You can breathe into the whole of your feet. Be kind, be gentle, and curious and accepting of anything that's going on in this moment. And then shift your awareness to the lower part of your legs. What's happening there? How do they feel? Making connection with wherever you're seated or lying. And as you breathe in and breathe out, shift your awareness to the torso, your lower abdomen, your lower back. And notice any movements in your lower abdomen as you breathe in and out. Are there any emotions sitting here as you sit here? In this moment, can you explore and accept your feelings as they are in this moment. Breathe deeply in and out, and feel your rib cage rising and falling as you breathe. Can you hear your heartbeat? And it's okay if you can't, but just be aware. How about your arms? Beginning with your fingertips and moving up the shoulders. Breathe in and out. Wiggle your fingers. Be aware of the sensations. Give your shoulders a little bit of a roll. Breathe in, focus on your neck. And stop moving if you like. Move your mindful attention to your jaw. Feel your lips, the inside of your mouth, your cheeks, your nose, your eyelids. You could open them now if your eyes are closed. Give them a little flutter. And bring your breath back to this time and this space now as we get ready for what Carol's going to talk to us about next.
Okay. I feel more relaxed and grounded after that exercise, so I hope the rest of you do too. First of all, I want to address what is fibromyalgia. It is a syndrome, and a syndrome is a recognizable complex of symptoms and physical findings which indicate specific conditions for which direct causes are not necessarily understood. And that's pretty much fibromyalgia. I may refer to fibromyalgia as FMS, for fibromyalgia syndrome, or fibro, or the full word fibromyalgia. It is characterized by widespread muscle pain, fatigue, sleep disturbances, and impaired cognitive functioning. It is seen in people of all ages, including young children to the elderly, although a diagnosis in young children is very rare. The most usual symptoms appear in 20s and 30s, age 20s and 30s, but are often not diagnosed until much later. And 7 out of 10 adult patients diagnosed with fibromyalgia still seem to be women. Does not mean that men don't have it. There are various reasons why men are not diagnosed, I think, as much as women. Now on to what are the most usual symptoms.
Could we just take a moment here,
Widespread.
Carol? We just take a
Pardon?
moment here. Could we just take a moment here, Carol, and
Sure,
see what
sure.
kind of symptoms people might live with or might know about if they've experienced fibromyalgia, or if they know someone who might have fibromyalgia or live with this? Could you pop some of those into the chat box? Just take a moment. Just could write those in. I mean, Carol's going to go over them, but if there's anything that you'd like to share. And if, okay, so somebody's written here chronic pain, chronic fatigue, the jaw, the TMJ jaw thing, painful spots on the body, irritable bowel syndrome, headaches, post-exertion fatigue, fibro fog, pain, limited movement. How are we doing, Carol? These are things that you're maybe going to talk about in a minute, yeah?
Yes, for sure.
These
Yes.
these are great. These are great. All right. So here we go. You all know what you're talking about.
Okay. The most usual symptoms are pain, which has lasted for a period of at least 3 months and is in all 4 quadrants of your body, both sides on your upper body and both sides on your lower body. Not all at the same time. Fibromyalgia pain moves around. Fatigue, to the extent which it impacts your daily functioning. Sleep disturbances, which I'll go into later. They may be insomnia, but more often it's just waking in the morning feeling really unrefreshed, like you haven't had a decent sleep. Impaired cognitive functioning, which we often refer to as fibro fog, and I will be talking more about that, and brain fog, and mood disorders. Mood disorders are not actually, it's the first four that are the main diagnostic symptoms, but mood disorders often occur, could be depression or anxiety or both. The symptoms that I've just mentioned are the most usual and appear in most usual when it's diagnosed. But there are several other symptoms which are part of fibromyalgia. Not everybody has them, and you don't have to have them all in order to be diagnosed. But there's an excellent diagram that Fiona has here that includes a whole lot of things that are part of fibromyalgia. But I'll just mention that headaches, often migraines. I came to my diagnosis with a history of 20 years of migraines. Luckily for me, they subsided once I was through menopause. Restless leg syndrome or leg cramps, numbness and tingling, irritable bowel syndrome. Yes, somebody mentioned that. IBS is part of fibromyalgia. Irritable bladder, which basically is just having to urinate frequently, which I do, and I hope I don't have to do it during the course of this presentation. TMJ, temporomandibular joint pain, which is in the jaw. Somebody mentioned that in the chat box. Sensitivity to stimuli, morning stiffness. I don't know anyone with fibro who doesn't have some morning stiffness. I am quite stiff for the first couple of hours of the morning, so couldn't possibly do an exercise program or anything until I'm well into my day. Raynaud's syndrome, which is cold hands and feet, mainly your extremities, and bluish color. Depression and or anxiety, which was mentioned before, and dizziness and or balance issues. At the early stage of fibro, I had a lot of dizziness, and now in the last couple of years, I have real balance issues. I just want to return to sensitivity to stimuli. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but I am extremely sensitive to lights, sounds, not so much smells, but crowds and temperature and or humidity variations. Lights, I couldn't possibly go to a concert with strobe lighting or and loud sounds recurring. Even lights, even if I am in somewhere where there's a fluorescent light burning out and it's flickering, I have to cover my eyes right away or I will have a migraine very quickly. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add to all of those symptoms or
We're
something
getting
you see on the diagram.
we're getting a thumbs up in the chat box, so somebody's agreeing with you there. Yeah. Yeah, but if anybody has anything to add there, um, can I ask you a question, Carol?
Mm-hmm.
When you say sensitivity to stimuli, when I know you said you get a headache and things like that, I'm just wondering, because I'm fairly new to my own diagnosis of fibro, and I came to it through the migraines as well. But when I'm around to like when I get triggered by like smells or crowds or temperatures and things like that, I literally feel like my whole body is buzzing. Like it's
Ah,
um
okay.
like I just is that what this is?
And
Is that what you're describing here, or is that different?
I have heard of that. It isn't really the way it hits me. It drains me of
Yeah,
energy. I
yeah,
feel like the energy is
yep,
just sucked right out of me. Um,
yeah.
I've certainly had to call my husband from the mall because I could not make it back to the car and have had somebody to come and get me and get my car.
Hmm.
Just that kind of environment, a mall or a large store, it just drains me of energy to the point.
I get the draining too, but I get this buzzing, and somebody else has chimed in the chat box that they get the buzzing too.
Really, really.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
So I think what we're seeing here is that it just manifests differently for everybody.
for sure, for sure.
That's really helpful. Um, does anybody have any questions about these additional symptoms, or are we good to move on? It's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yes, it,
I really appreciate this image too, especially under the armpits where it says not respected, not believed, and that we
yes,
have to negotiate bargaining our good days and our bad days. But I think you're going to get into that later, aren't you?
right, right. Okay, I feel like we've missed a slide here.
Did we? Hang on, I can go back. Okay, we've got four quadrants, additional symptoms. Um, because we got the life events or factors, and then with gradual or immediate onset. I think it's because we switched them around, didn't we, this morning?
Okay, you know what? No, I know what I'm thinking of. I have just something to read from here
Ah,
before you get into your part, Fiona. Um, we question what are the possible causes of fibromyalgia. At this point, the primary cause is not known, although more recent evidence is pointing to it being a neurophysiological condition. What is known is that people who suffer from fibromyalgia have higher than normal levels of a chemical called substance P in the cerebral spinal fluid. This produces a dysfunction in the body's ability to process pain and creates suprasensitive nerves throughout the body. Most people with fibromyalgia also have lower than normal levels of the brain chemical serotonin. A study in Sweden has found that fibromyalgia is definitely linked to abnormal activity in parts of the brain that process pain signals and link them to other areas of the body. And I think we're going to jump off from that to Fiona talking about
mhm.
trauma and the body.
We are going to talk about that next. Uh, what's important here in this other slide back here is that it can be gradual or immediate onset, right? And there can be lots of other reasons too. We're going to talk about physical trauma and emotional trauma here, but just know that other reasons can be in the background, like viral illness, infection, hormonal changes. If you've been on steroids, high dose steroids, or steroids for some time and a withdrawal from that, things like that, and extended disruptions of sleep and things like that. And you mentioned earlier, menopause, right, can affect it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about trauma and the role that trauma might play um, in the manifestation of fibromyalgia in the body, because it's quite interesting. So, uh, I've got some notes here for myself. Um, um, when so on the right side, right on the right side, I love this little diagram on the right here. When we experience trauma or some kind of adverse event in our lives, we have an amazing capability of managing it in the moment with fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. And more recently, fawn has been added to the criteria. And that's fabulous because this is an adaptation that we need to save us in these moments. And basically, what we're talking about in these moments is when, the tiger's in the room and we need to have some kind of, way of managing this massive stress in the moment. However, they have found links, and I say they, scientists have been doing studies that what can happen from using this, whether that's once or multiple times, is that it actually makes changes and creates changes in our central nervous system. And so there's actual links that in studies have been created between fibro and trauma itself. And so when our body enters into that survival mode, and that's what we call it, survival mode, we should understand that it's possible that long-term changes can happen in our brain function and in our structure. And this might increase our pain sensitivity or our perception to pain sensitivity. What's important to know about this is the brain is while a brilliant mechanism, it cannot distinguish between perception of pain and actual pain sometimes because it happens in the same part of the brain. And so it's kind of irrelevant to the brain whether um, uh, there is pain or there's a perception of pain or anticipation of pain. And there are studies that talk about the anticipation of pain. That's not to say that the pain doesn't exist, because it does. And in fibro, it definitely exists. And so we can actually, it can be exacerbated by the anticipation of stress, or sorry, of pain later on as well. But understand that not everybody who's experienced trauma will develop something like fibromyalgia, and then not everybody with fibromyalgia has a history of um, trauma. Trauma is just one of the many potential causes that's been identified in fibromyalgia research. But don't take my word for it. Um, there's evidence that backs all of this up. There was a study done in 2018 that found the majority of people living with fibromyalgia, and I am reading from a screen over here, sorry, because it's a lot of information, living with fibromyalgia reported a significant association between the onset of symptoms and experience of emotional or physical trauma. And then what's interesting is that there was a study done just in regards to physical trauma. And this study was done out of Israel in 2000. And interestingly, it was done in relation to neck injuries, but in individuals had a greater than tenfold risk of developing fibro within 1 year of experiencing something like an actual physical injury. Can you write in the chat box what it is that you need to say? Somebody's got their hand up. So go ahead and write in the chat box what it is that you need to ask. Questions are welcome. If you can write that in the chat box, we'll get to that. So that's around physical trauma. The quality of the data pool, though, is too low to draw further conclusions in and around this at the moment. But experts do note that emotional trauma is more common than physical trauma, but that doesn't mean that physical trauma does not exacerbate or create the onset of fibromyalgia. Okay. So that's why this is important to note here. So let's talk about emotional trauma, though. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat box there because someone had their hand up. So in and around emotional trauma, fibromyalgia isn't exclusively related to childhood trauma, but childhood traumatic events, which is labeled as CTEs here. There has been a link, or they have created a link to fibromyalgia. And so there was a 2018 study done, a small study of just 136 women, and they found that these women were significantly more prone to living with fibromyalgia. And then in this 2020 study here, and I'm sorry, I meant to put the rest of the the citation in here with all the names, but there were so many of them. This mistreatment in childhood is associated with it's actually associated with 2 times a higher risk of developing fibromyalgia later in life. And that study was done in the UK. And then interestingly, 88.2% of women living with fibromyalgia had experienced childhood trauma, and that was in another study that was done. And so there's quite a lot of research that's being generated now. This is fairly recent research, 2020. This one here, the 88.2%, this study was done in 2022. So there's evidence to suggest the connections are quite real. So, Carol, tell us about the importance of sleep.
I will in a minute. I'm going to go back to that list that you listed a little bit first, because you've gone over physical and emotional trauma. We certainly have many people come to us following a car accident, maybe not immediately after, but it can be a few years after.
Yep.
or a workplace accident. But the flu or other viral illness or a non-viral infection, I feel that that's what started all of mine. I was really sick in June of 1994 with bronchitis and asthma, and was on prednisone and had to wean off that. And my symptoms started that fall. A very definite change in my being able to function at work, etc. So certainly the infection and the steroid withdrawal I can relate to. And then that brings us to another one on the list, extended disruption of sleep. So I'll talk a little bit about sleep. Sleep studies have shown that the kinds of sleep problems which are associated with fibromyalgia, insomnia, and fragmented sleep deprive people of stage 4 deep sleep, which is the non-REM sleep that helps us feel refreshed in the morning and also when the muscles and soft tissues are repaired. So that certainly, it makes a whole lot of sense to me, because I wake up often feeling like I was hit by a bus. And I have had a sleep study done a few years back. And when they were going over the results with me, it was mentioned that I didn't seem to stay in stage 4 sleep for any length of time. If I got into stage 3, I would just get into stage 4, and then something would bump me out of it. And I would be going through the stages again and missing stage 4 sleep. So it all made sense to me when I found that out.
Could I add something to that, Carol?
Sure.
I did a sleep study as well, and it was shocking to me to learn that I never hit any. I slept less than 1 hour a night.
Oh my goodness.
I know, and so getting less, like just almost. I sleep now. I've learned some strategies. I get some sleep now, but it was absolutely shocking because I did a 5-day sleep study, and so I just it's the importance of sleep. I think we take it for granted. And I just wanted to note too that when we're talking about, things that might trigger the onset, somebody said in the chat box here that their diagnosis came after they went through breast cancer and subsequent treatments. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And I've seen
Yes,
also that
yes,
pregnancy and having a baby can do it as well. And
yes.
I mean, think about the sleep factor right there, right?
A long period of sleep deprivation can bring on symptoms, and certainly uh, after you have a baby or during pregnancy, you often don't sleep well, and then with a young baby. So I can see why that would bring it on.
Me too. And the breast cancer and subsequent treatments makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
For
Especially with
sure, it
everything
does.
that you
Yeah.
have to do. So thanks for sharing that.
Okay. From 1990 until the present, we're looking at how it's diagnosed now. Um, Fibromyalgia was diagnosed by the presence of pain in all 4 quadrants. I mentioned that before, for at least 3 months, as well as the determination of the existence of at least 11 of 18 tender points in specific areas of the body. Before we address the tender points, I'm just going to go through the most recent method of diagnosis uses a combination of the tender points and an in-depth questionnaire that looks at the experience of pain and fatigue in an individual over the past week. The questionnaire is directed toward a week of your life, but some doctors will give a log or assign a log or a journal to a patient to look at a longer period of time and when their pain occurs and where it occurs in the body, and same with fatigue, what kind of things bring on fatigue, etc. But if we look at the diagram of the tender points, in the back, there's at the base of the skull, on your shoulders, and number 5 and 6, I would feel that they probably should be a little lower because many of us experience bad pain between our shoulder blades. And then 7 and 8 in the lower back. 9, 10 in our hips, but kind of toward the back, almost under your buttocks. And then from in the front view, in here, but also in my upper, in my chest. If I get those tender points are bothering me, I know that I am into a flare, because they're so sore that I can't even touch myself. That I mean, some of the back pain areas, I have some of those most every day, but the pain in my chest, which led me at first to think I was having a heart attack. And I'm not the only one with fibro who's ended up in emergency thinking the same thing with the bad pain in your chest. Elbows, on the inside of my elbow, if you touch me there, I can hit the roof. And on the inside of our knees. So those are the most usual, but it does not mean that that's the only place that you can experience pain when you have fibromyalgia. It's just the most usual ones. Okay. We could go into treatments now. These are all treatments. Actually, I have tried the whole list. Physiotherapy is something we don't necessarily need all the time, but if you're experiencing particular pain in a specific area of your body, it's really helpful to go for physio and get some help with stretches that may help. And stretching will help us ongoing with fibro. Chiropractic treatment, I go once every 2 weeks for a chiropractic treatment. Massage therapy, I go once a month. I could go more, but I can't afford to go more. But I can tolerate a fairly deep therapeutic massage. Some people with fibro can't tolerate massage at all. But I sometimes wear my night guard, which I use for TMJ, but I wear it to my massage appointment because I'm apt to grip my teeth when she's got her thumbs really, really, especially in that shoulder blade area. But she would let up on the pressure if I just say so, and she always does. But if I can allow her to get deep into that area, it will help me afterwards. It just loosens up some very, very tight knots that I have in there. Acupuncture, I have kind of forgotten about, because I had some acupuncture done a number of years ago in my upper back, and it really was helpful at the time. I'm going to come back to medications. Diet and supplements, it's mainly what our group focuses on is mainly just nutritious diet is really important. And that's easier said than done for people with fibromyalgia, because by the time you get to dinner time at the end of your day, you're often too exhausted to cook a nutritious meal. So that's a tough one for some of us. For me, I find that some protein about 3 or 4 times a day, a little bit of protein. I carry some almonds in my purse very often, a bag of almonds when I'm out and about or away from home. And certainly reduced carbs will help me. And I'm not always good at doing that. Heat applied, or a hot shower or bath, and by applied I mean those hot bags we can heat up in the microwave. I certainly use those a lot. I start every day with a hot shower. It's the only way I can deal with the stiffness and the pain in my shoulders and my upper back. Mild cardiovascular exercise 3 times a week. And someone mentioned in the chat box earlier, post-exercise fatigue is a very, very real thing. And there's such a fine line between what we can tolerate and what we can't. And it's one of the things that I've kind of learned over the years, uh, how much I can tolerate. And water exercise is the biggest thing that has helped me with pain. I'm in the pool twice a week for an aquasize class. And I started way back in the fall after I was diagnosed 27 years ago. I was referred by the specialist who diagnosed me, suggested I go to Sherbrooke Pool, which had warm water, and there was a specially trained uh, exercise or aquafit teacher who was specially trained in fibromyalgia, arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. So she offered classes for each of those groups, and it was really, really helpful. I'm now in a regular class, and I just do it to the pace or the extent to which I can tolerate that particular day. Yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, or melt. I did yoga for years. I stopped with COVID. I tried it online, but I have trouble getting into it when it's not in person. And I haven't got back to doing yoga. Fiona, you may want to say something about melt,
Yeah,
MELT.
I'll talk about melt. Um, I was introduced to melt by my friend and the person who practices it and does it with individuals, Ruth Baines. And she's a Pilates instructor who specializes in melt, and it's a myofascial kind of a release. I don't want to talk about it wrong because I'm not an expert in melt, but it's helped me. And what it does is it keeps basically all of the fluid and the muscles moving and the soft tissues moving in your body. And you do it through a series of very gentle exercises with soft rollers and soft balls. I'm allergic to latex, so all of the stuff is latex free. And um, I have done sessions in the past where the release has been so big, it's made me go like, oh, in the moment. It made like this awful guttural sound, but I've been able to move parts of me afterwards that felt like they were stuck. I imagine kind of like you do when you bite down on your guard when you're going for those massages. And when you say like some people can't do massage, I can't do massage, and so melt has been really good for me that way. And so it's something that you probably need to learn with a practitioner, but there is somebody in Winnipeg that does it who's highly skilled. And it's I feel like it's a softer form of like it's not Pilates, but it's a softer form of that kind of like toning, if you will, but it releases all of your muscles nice and gently. I do yoga as well, and so they feel like they're complementary practices for me. And sometimes my yoga practice or melt is like literally all I've got in me for a day is like 20 seconds on my mat, a minute, 2 minutes, and sometimes that has to be enough. And sometimes I've got 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yoga can certainly help, and all of those things are helpful. And the more gentle, the better, probably for our bodies.
Yeah, very much so. Somebody's written in the chat box that Qigong is also gentle and very helpful, and they're absolutely right. And I think that might be on another slide, but isn't on this one, but or might be on another version of these slides. But yes, Qigong as well,
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah. Um, Now returning just briefly to medications, because I'm not going to
Oh,
speak much
sorry.
about medications. Um, it's very it's very individual, and you need to work your way through it with your doctor. Um, Almost everybody who's diagnosed with fibromyalgia is put on a low dose of amitriptyline um, to help pain and sleep. Now, I went on it for about 4 months when I was first diagnosed, but I couldn't tolerate it. I found that the hangover effect in the morning, added to how we already feel in the morning, just was making my functioning that much worse. So I didn't stay on that. Um, for pain, I managed to use extra strength Tylenol, and if I really needed a Tylenol 1. I stay away from Tylenol 3. I am a person who's very afraid of getting addicted to something. And the other thing is that Tylenol 3 causes constipation, and that can be a real problem. Um, and a doctor has prescribed a muscle relaxant to me, which I take a couple of hours before bedtime, and it just is a little bit extra to help relax muscles. Um, and other than that, I'm not going to say much more about medications. If anyone wants to add anything, but I'm not at all an expert on medications.
I
So,
think, like you said, Carol, it's very individual and it's something that has to be explored with your
yeah,
doctor. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
And what's going to work for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another.
for sure, for sure. That yes, I meant to say that. For that's important.
And I think I'll add this about medications. It can feel, especially when you're trying to find solutions, it can feel very frustrating sometimes trying to arrive at some of those solutions. Um, but I would say be patient with the process, with yourself and with your doctors, because often it can feel like you're just throwing enough stuff at the wall to see what sticks. I'm being very polite when I say that. Um, um, but when you talk to your doctor's going to say that, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, because it's so individual. And so you just need to be patient with the process. So Carol, tell us about this slide.
Well, it's so easy. These are the things that are the fine line between what we can manage and what's way too much, and that differs from day to day. That's the other thing. Um, some days we could clean part of our house. I can never clean all of my house. That would be impossible. Um, some days any kind of housework is impossible. Um, Backing up to exercise, it's the same thing. Cardio or high impact is not your friend, and for sure. You can overdo it. And with fibromyalgia, you should never really be doing high impact exercise. Um, Shopping is something that I have a real time with. My husband has been doing grocery shopping for the past 25 years. Uh, that's the kind of thing that just exhausts me. Um, Dinners and special occasions. Um, Fiona and I were kind of smiling. I made a mistake of planning a family dinner last night, and everybody brought something. The food was not an issue, but just getting ready for it, and it was family, so I was okay with it. I didn't have to fuss over my house or anything like that. But just simply, by the time they left, it was a weeknight, so it was all over by 9 o'clock. But by the time they left, I was exhausted and just hoping that I got a decent sleep so I could be ready for today. And I managed that. Um, and our downtimes each day are so personal and individual. Um, for me, anything before 1 o'clock in the afternoon is almost impossible. I really try not to make appointments for mornings. I can manage to function much better in the afternoon. And then late afternoon, I will have a really down time. And then in the evening, I pick up again. And cognitively and even physically, I'm probably better at 9 o'clock at night. For sure, I'm better than 9 o'clock in the morning. But that is so different for different people. Other people with fibro wake up and are able to do something until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're done. So it's so different. Oh, and one thing that we women are good at is making sure that everyone else is okay before ourselves. And that's a hard one to change, but we need to work at it.
One of the things that's helped me with this is my partner constantly reminds me, the airplane's going down, the airplane's going down, mask on you first, mask on you first. Right. You can't help anybody else on the plane, honey, until the mask is on you first.
Well, that's a good reminder.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Right. So, I mean, it's extreme, but it works. Right.
Um,
So,
Now I'm not sure what we're seeing in the chat box. You might want to
actually, nobody's talking in the chat box at the moment. Everybody's quite quiet. But let's ask people about strategies that you might be using in your day-to-day lives to manage yourselves, right?
mhm.
Are there things that you do um, in your own world to get through each day? Just
While
take a
you're
moment.
doing that, I was just going to talk a little bit about my personal journey. Um, I mentioned in the fall of 1994 that my symptoms started, and the most notable for me was fatigue. Uh, I had just awful fatigue. I was having trouble getting to work in the morning. I would have a shower and be dizzy in the shower, have to hang on to the wall of the shower and wash with one hand. I would lay down after a shower, cover myself up and lay down for a bit. Then I would get up and get dressed. And then I'd have some breakfast. And then I'd lay down again before I finished getting ready for work. I was having trouble driving myself to work, but I needed my car for my job. So I had to get there by car. Um, just awful trouble with fatigue. And all of that led to problems with my work. My supervisor at the time also happened to be a good friend of mine, and she could tell. She told me she could tell by my eyes uh, when I came in whether I was going to be able to function that day at work or not. And some days were just a write off. She decreased my size of my caseload. That was the first thing we tried. Um, and I came in from 10 to 6 2 days a week instead of 8:30 to 4:30 so that I could have some quiet time from 4:30 to 6 to do some dictation or whatever I needed to do that I needed quiet for. We tried that. My doctor put me on half-time work at some point to see if that would help. It did to some extent. Um, but all of this took place over between 1995 and 2002. And in there, I ended up uh, half time on a job that wasn't a caseload because I couldn't. If I was supposed to be seeing an employer at 2 in the afternoon in Transcona, I didn't know if I could even get in the car and drive there, let alone hold a meeting. So I had to give up a caseload and ended up doing a piece that was part of our voc rehab department that was just a file reviewing great big thick files and summarizing medical and summarizing the voc rehab on them. And it was a tedious job, and it was a very easy job to fall asleep on. And I was having a hard enough time staying awake. It also separated me from the rest of my department. Um, and they kind of forgot about me. They didn't include me in department meetings. There was a Christmas party that I wasn't included in. Um, it was it was a stressful time and a very sad time for me trying to just to keep working. Um, One of the worst things, the hardest thing that I found to handle was I lost a very good friend. Um, she didn't pass away. What I mean is I lost her as a friend. We had always gone for coffee. We'd always gone out for lunch together. We had gone to aerobics classes after work together. We did some things on the weekend together. We were very good friends, I thought. Um, but she could not get her head around the fibromyalgia. At one point, she said, "Carol, just pull up your socks and get on with life, for God's sakes." She was so frustrated with me. And at that point, she totally cut me out of her life. Um, She never came to get me for coffee or anything after that. If I ran into her in the elevator, she was just looked very, very awkward, but wouldn't speak to me. Um, and that was the end of that friendship. And it was a very, I couldn't talk about that for, I'll bet you, for 8 or 10 years, I couldn't talk about that without crying. It's now far in my past and I've dealt with it. But that's one of the things we have to learn to, a lot quicker than I did, to try and accept it and get on with life and focus on those who do support you. Um,
Well said. Um, yeah, you're absolutely right. Some people have written in the chat box, Carol, that their downtime strategy is 9 p.m. bed every night and try to stick to this every day because they have chronic fatigue and no pain. And I wondered if we could just talk for a second about the relationship between chronic fatigue and fibro because um, they've changed the diagnostic criteria in the DSM-5 and they're kind of lumping it all together, aren't they?
yes, they are. They're kind of considering them on the same spectrum, one at one end being probably a little bit more focused on pain because the fibromyalgia, and at the other end on fatigue. But my doctor said to me at one point years ago, well, Carol, you probably have chronic fatigue syndrome as well, but there's no use diagnosing you with that because the treatment really doesn't differ. And that's kind of how they're treating it now, as not one and the same, because they do come with just a lot more emphasis on the fatigue for chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yep.
But my experience, even though I've been diagnosed with fibro, has always been I have more trouble. I find the fatigue more debilitating in my day to day life than the pain, is how I would put it. So I can certainly, but getting to bed at 9 o'clock at night, if I got to bed at 9 o'clock every night, I would lots of nights still be awake at 2 in the morning. I have moved my going to bed about 45 minutes earlier than I was. And I guess it means that I finally get to sleep maybe 45 minutes sooner than I used to. That's so individual again, so different for different people. Our clocks don't work normally, that's for sure.
They don't, do they? And you're right, it's very individual.
Yeah.
Somebody else in the chat box has said, I tried no sugar, no flour diet. I felt almost no fibro, but I can't seem to stay clean. I fall back in and then all my symptoms are back. It's so difficult because so many foods have sugar in the ingredients. And it doesn't say this, but they're so yummy.
I know.
And I'd like to add to that too. I've done experiments where I've cut out white stuff like sugar and flour. And
Mhm.
I feel, me personally, I can't speak for other people, but me personally, I there is a remarkable difference in my sort of like sense of inflammation and pain level. So there might be something to that, you know.
Oh, I
So,
think there is definitely.
mhm.
And I think many of us know there is something to it. It's just to try and stick to it is so difficult.
So because
Um,
pizza's so good.
I
Oh,
know,
it's so good.
and some days I don't know where this thinking comes from. It just doesn't make sense. But some days when you've had a bad day with fibro and pain and fatigue, you just think, I deserve it. I darn well deserve to have this. And that's so such ridiculous thinking, but that's kind of how human beings work, I think.
It is a little bit, isn't it? There is a tendency to want to blame ourselves when actually it's kind of beyond our control.
Yeah.
And I like it that one of the strategies for living with fibromyalgia you put here first, the acceptance of change in our life, and that we have to actually go through the stages of grief. And you mentioned that with your friend.
Mm-hmm.
But it affects us in all kinds of ways, doesn't it? Our jobs, our volunteering, you know, we could lose our license because we get too dizzy, you know, things like that. So it can affect us in lots of different ways. So, you know, do be aware that you might be going through some kind of stages of grief. And, you know, it's okay to seek therapeutic services for things like that. Because
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
huge. It's huge for people.
Mm.
So other strategies. We'll get through these strategies and then we'll be wrapped up today. All right, so let's we're behind time, so let's see if we can get through these, Carol.
Okay. Um, your formal support, so the support group for me is one of them. Doctors and any therapists you may be seeing. Informal supports, family and friends. And as I mentioned with my friend, you have to just try and accept those who are supportive. And if they're not supportive, move on in your life without them. That's all there is to it. Easier
You
said than done, though.
it is easier said than done, but you do really start finding out who the real champions in your life are and who aren't.
Yes, yes. And for me, my husband has always been very supportive through these many years. He's been there for me, and he now has Parkinson's, and now I have to be there for him. So it's all a give and take.
It is,
Um,
isn't it?
Educate yourself, but be careful what resources you're using. Be scrutinizing on the internet and make sure there's a lot of acknowledged fibromyalgia groups out there that have reliable resources. Our support group has a library, which is located at Manitoba uh, at Manitoba Possible. Is that what's called now? Society for
Oh,
Manitobans with Disabilities, Manitoba Possible.
yep.
Um, but check the sources of your information is basically what I'm saying there. Uh, your doctor may have pamphlets to give you, but that usually just includes a very little bit of information. If you want more,
Oh, sorry. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
no, it's okay. Um, Sleep routine is
Mm,
another thing that's easier said than done. We talked about that a few minutes ago a little bit.
we did. We did.
But using quiet time or music or meditation or a consistent bedtime, if you can keep to that, is helpful for some people. But a big one these days is consider unplugging about an hour before your desired bedtime or sleep time.
Hmm.
Um, and another that and that's I've really tried in the last while to do that, to put my phone aside by about 9 o'clock, and then when I go to bed a couple of hours later, I'm unplugged.
So I actually use my phone to give me a reminder. It literally chimes at me at 9 p.m. Ding! And it tells me it's time to unplug everything. And then this is a practice I've been doing for the last 6 months. It's really helped me a lot. Friday at sundown, I unplug from everything until Sunday morning.
Really?
And it has made a massive difference in my life. But I work online all week.
Yeah.
So it's made a massive difference.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with you here.
Yeah. Um,
Stress.
Reduce and manage your stress. Identify your stressors first. Do some thinking and self really look at that, because you may not realize where your stressors are coming from. Have realistic expectations of yourself. That is a big one, and that takes time to learn. Um, to simplify things in your life to whatever extent you can. Um, Use relaxation techniques like deep breathing yoga, creating a peaceful environment for yourself, whether that's candles and music, whatever it is. Um, when you're doing something like errands, group your activities together so you're not using more time and energy than you need to. And nurture yourself. And if this includes seeking therapy, then definitely do that. It's an important part of of treating fibromyalgia. Stretch frequently, change positions often. I'm feeling that right now.
Me too. I'm like, I need to get up.
Yeah. Um, and a physiotherapist that can help you with stretching exercises is good for this. And we've talked about the things that you can that keep your body fluid moving and but gentle. Um, oh yes, Fiona mentioned earlier today, one study found that exercising in a pool with warm water for just 2 weeks decreased pain by 15% in women with fibromyalgia. And for me, that is definitely the case.
We were discussing this, and I feel like this is an absolute justification for having to get some kind of like hot tub or pool in the back garden now. I don't know. I'm just saying. I think I'm gonna have to save up for it, but
I had a hot tub and I've got rid of it. We actually I had it for 15 years, but I hadn't used it much in the past three. But I have atrial fibrillation,
mm,
um, and I couldn't use it anymore. I would get in, and within 5 minutes, I wasn't feeling well, and it turns out it was my AFib that was the problem.
oh,
So I would do better with a
pool.
nice warm pool that I could get in and move
Yeah.
gently in. Yes,
Yeah. Oh well, I can dream on, right? Somebody
yeah.
in the chat box said, I recently took a CBT with mindfulness course, and that's along the therapeutic lines, isn't it? It sounds so good. And that's so helpful as well. And then somebody else has said, chemicals in a hot tub caused me so much pain the next day. The warm pool sounds good. I think we're all moving in the direction of a warm pool here, especially a
I think
salt water pool. I think we've got some
yes.
consensus here.
So someone find some resources and open one for us, please.
Right?
I do now go to Margaret Grant Pool, and it is warmer than many others. Sherbrooke and Margaret Grant are known for being the warmest city pools. So,
Oh, noted.
um, establish your regular treatment plan, plans that work for you on a day-to-day basis, but also establish a flare treatment plan. And this might include increasing your medication or increasing rest periods to 2 or 3 times per day, or going for a relaxation massage, or just taking a slow walk outside on a nice day. You don't have to go far, just a very short walk just to get some fresh air. Um, but sometimes when you're in a flare, just to do that is impossible. So, um, oh, at the wellness center, there also is a warm pool. Somebody mentioned in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm losing my voice.
You are. We're almost at the end. We're almost at the end. I know we're a little bit over time. Thanks everybody for staying. We started a little bit late and we had a little bit of trouble, so appreciate everybody's patience. This is we got two lost points here, number 8 and number 9, don't we?
Yes, yeah. Employing fiber fog strategies is important because fiber fog is a real thing, and increased pain and fatigue bring on fiber fog. I've had to switch from using my phone as my central information center to using our kitchen calendar, mostly because of my husband. He has some memory issues with Parkinson's, and he checks that calendar every night and every morning, and maybe even throughout the day to see what I have on, where he's supposed to be, what time he has to be ready to go, that kind of thing. When needing to work, create a time and place without noise or interruptions. And I had to do that in preparation for today. Um, I have to carve out a spot for me that has no background noise at all. I just have to be very quiet. Um, and determine your best time of day for activities, whether they be physical or mental, if there is a best time of day. And rest. Above all, work in rest periods to your day before you need to, before you become completely exhausted. And that's something that I've learned to do over the years. I do sit in my recliner and put my feet up and rest for about 20 minutes to 40 minutes, a couple of times during the day. And I don't wait till evening anymore to do that. So that's a big help, actually. Um, what's our number 9?
Well, we had to finish the list for number 8 was long because we had to make a list of activities. And then maybe you suggested
Oh,
making that list before bed so it gets done tomorrow.
yes.
And then I loved it. I loved it that you talked about yellow stickies.
Are you looking at that screen right now, Fiona?
I am.
I can't see beyond. Okay,
Hang on. There you are. Can you see it now?
there we are. Okay. Um, yes, yellow stickies I have around my house. If I have an appointment in the morning and I have to function somehow, or if I have to make a phone call even first thing in the morning, there's a yellow sticky on my bathroom mirror that I will see right away in the morning when I go in. And making lists. We make a weekly list usually on Sunday evening. We look at what our week entails for both of us. And prior to bed, I make a list of what needs to be done, but also by being flexible, because what you think needs to be done may not be possible tomorrow. So you have to be prepared to put it on the next day's list. I carry it, well, my phone I use for my notes of things as I think about them. If I'm away from home and think of something I have to do, it's in a note on my phone, and I refer to that when I usually in the evening. So,
Mhm.
uh, and again, rest is a big one. We can't forget about that.
So we put it on there twice.
Yeah, Fiona put it on there twice just so we would remember to rest. Okay, I've talked about taking rest breaks, building them into your day. They need to be flexible if you're making lists of to-do lists. Um, to not schedule consecutive days with a lot of activity, like a family dinner and a webinar the next day. Uh, break large jobs down into small tasks, and that's what most of us have to do in cleaning our house. If I clean the bathrooms one day, that's all that'll get done that day. Um, set limits on time spent in situations and with those people who trigger or drain you. I have a particular friend, and she's a good friend, and she's would do anything for you. But to go out for coffee with her even just drains me of energy. I think it's because I feel like her right now. I talk because she talks all the time, and she is very scattered, one thing to another. And by the time I come out of there, I'm just wow, I'm exhausted. But there's some friends you don't give up, so you
It's
learn
true.
to schedule those so that you can handle it.
Yes. I think we all have emotional vampires.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
So what do we do going forward, Carol?
Well, we remember that we're not the same as we used to be. It's a whole new and different life that you are living. You need to accept your limited energy and relearn how to manage your energy reserves. Be patient with yourself and with those close to you. They are also relearning. You can still enjoy life and remember to have fun and laugh. And we should have had a joke or something to end with,
We
but
really should have, shouldn't we?
I, I don't have one off the top of my head.
I'm terrible at telling jokes and I'm not very funny, so I don't know. But you're right. We need to laugh a lot. And laughing is a really great what I call it like a diversion or a distraction. And when I'm having a really bad day, one of the things that my partner does is literally puts on comedy. So that I'm like my attention's diverted. And it always
Yeah,
works. It always
yeah,
works,
yeah,
right? So
yeah. A good laugh is good medicine.
it really is just like a good cry is, a good laugh is. It releases all those wonderful, wonderful, you know, like doses of serotonin and dopamine. So,
Yeah, yeah,
so anyway, we're at the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I know we went over time today. I really appreciate it.
yes.
Um, somebody says we need to clone the husbands. I cannot disagree.
Clone your husband.
And yours, Carol. You've been married longer
Yes,
than I have. So,
yes, a long time.
thank you so much for being with us today, all of you. And thank you so much for your comments in the chat box. If you can take a couple of moments to complete this survey about today's webinar, it helps us improve our services and what you'd like to hear from us in our webinars in the future. And we hope today's been really helpful for you. I'd like to thank my co-facilitator and awesome co-host Carol Potter, who knows all things fibromyalgia. And yes, we can put that survey link in the chat. Oh, can I put that in the chat box? I should have done that, shouldn't I? Hang on, I'll write it here. Yes, I'll write it. HTT. I'm going to do it slowly here. PS. Hopefully I get it right because I'm dyslexic and I sometimes put things backwards. So let's hope I did this right. Hopefully I did that right. There we go. No, it's all right. I did it, I think.
Oh, okay.
There it is in the chat box. I should have been ready with that. Next time I will be ready. Thank you so, so much for joining us today.
Yes.
We'll see you
Thank you
next
to you
time.
all.
Thank you so much. Our next webinar is on chronic pain, which kind of goes along with what we did here today,
Hmm.
and managing that. So really looking forward to doing that too. That's in 2 weeks from now. Thanks so much, everybody. Catch you
Okay.
later.
Bye now.